Welcome to the first of the Talking Point Tuesday events with the NIHR Innovation Observatory. So thank you all for coming. We also have some people online that are dialed in. So it's a really good way of making sure that we have national coverage by having hybrid events. So this is the first Talking Point Tuesday, and there'll be one a month right the way through till next July. So various themes, various subjects and various coverage, always starting with networking. So anyone that's in the north, there's an opportunity for a networking session at the beginning, and then we move into the same series of events. So it'll be keynote speaker about a particular theme, and then we'll have an expert panel, and then we're also doing virtual experts in residence. So there's an opportunity to have a one-to-one with a specialist within a field. So today our specialists are around crowdfunding. So that'll be something that will continue across all of the events going forward. So today we're going to focus on funding research that we've been conducting, which Emma, my colleague, is going to run through because it's her specialism in her field, and she's managed the research. And then the next theme is around horizon scanning. So why industry should do horizon scanning. So obviously it's the NIHR Innovation Observatory specialism, but we just want to try and share with industry, particularly small businesses, how you do it, why you do it, and where you access the information. So that'll be the next session. And then the session in November will be around applying for funding from the NIHR RSS. So that'll be the next one. Oh. So I'm Dawn. I didn't even introduce myself. I just went straight into it. So I'm Industry Partnership Lead, and I've been with the Innovation Observatory for nearly a year now. So today we're starting, as I mentioned, with Emma, who's going to go through our funding research that she's been working on. And then we're going to have a short session from Andrew Hodgson, one of our partners at the Innovation Super Network. So the Innovation Super Network has some funding and access to finance, which allows some SMEs, if they're eligible, which is pretty much the Northeast, to have 12 hours business support in terms of funding. And then following that, we'll be joined by other partners. So Hannah and John from the BIPC, and they're going to talk through what the BIPC does and what it can offer and how it can support small businesses. And then we have a closing network session, which is 11:30 to 12, which is also an opportunity to dial into the expert. So as mentioned, today's crowdfunding. So if anyone wanted to have a slot with Oliver on crowdfunding, just catch me and we'll organise that. So yeah, that's Oliver. So CEO of Fundsurfer, so funding investor, and he'll be available 11:30 to 12 for one-to-ones virtually. But we booked some rooms upstairs, so we'll be able to just set that up for you. So the Innovation Observatory, what is it? So we capture health trends in life sciences and health innovation and focus on areas of future promise. So our specialism, as mentioned, is horizon scanning. So what's coming up, what are the trends, how are things going to pan out 5, 10 years, so what are we looking to? And we cover medicines and we cover medtech, so digital devices and diagnostics. So those are the key areas that we focus on. I just repeated some of that already. So we have funding from the NIHR, and we also are commissioned for particular pieces of research as well. So that goes back to the NHS with patients as the outcome. of everything. And we also keep the gateway for technology assessments for NICE. So that's another piece of work that we do as well. So the team, so you might see some of the members of the team within the audience, so feel free to say hi. So how have we helped SMEs and industry? So as said, my role's industry partnership lead, so my background's partnership management, stakeholder management, business engagement, internationalisation. So we specifically work with small businesses to build capacity. So we can't do one-to-one with people, small businesses, any business. So the way that we support them is through training sessions such as this, events, sharing our intelligence. So our website's got a whole bunch of what's called outputs on there, which covers all of the journals that we've submitted, publications, research, dashboards. So there's a whole wealth of information there that's publicly available. Obviously, some of it that's been commissioned isn't public, but there is a lot of public-facing material that's available to support. So just some case studies. So we worked with Tiny Teas Trust, who's just about to go on an NIHR programme tomorrow for small businesses. So that was good. So we worked with Kat to show her how to do horizon scanning, how we do evidence synthesis, and pull it together for some research, for funding that she was looking at, and some grant applications. So that's how we supported Tiny Teas. And just a little
progress. Recording stopped.
Just a little quote there from Caitlin. And we also worked with Marrow Bio. So the same. So how do you where do you look for research? Where do you look for data? What are the sources? How do you pull all of that together to produce robust evidence? And just a quote from Daniel there, the CEO. So I mentioned Talking Point Tuesdays and that this is the inaugural session. So the idea is to have a monthly meetup with an opportunity for people to network. So it's always a hybrid event. So we're national. So by doing it in a hybrid manner, it means that we can access small businesses nationally. And we'll also always have industry experts and, as mentioned, monthly topics. So the next one is Tuesday the 15th of October, and that's the one on horizon scanning and just going through how you do it, why you do it, what you need to do, what are the data sources, how do you pull it all together, and then how do you use it for funders or for grant applications. So just handing over to my colleague Emma, who is going to take you through the funding research.
Hello, so yes, I'm Emma, and I am one of the information specialists at the Innovation Observatory. So typically when we do horizon scans, they can either focus on certain aspects of development. So for example, we may do a pipeline scan, we may do a clinical trial scan, and then one component of that can also be a funding landscape scan. Sometimes they're pushed together into one large horizon scan, or they can be focused on those specific components. So in terms of funding landscape scans, what we're trying to do is understand where funding is being directed, and that can either be through public bodies, through policies, or through business or kind of charitable organisations. Typically, I would say that when we're talking about funding horizon scans, people assume that it will just give you this idea of what is coming on the horizon. But I would argue that actually it's a lot broader than that. So I would be expecting to use that data for things like identifying opportunities for growth and development. So there could be particular trends in data which suggest something is increasing in popularity, or it can help us identify things that have perhaps been overlooked. Highlight, as I said, the obvious ones, signals of innovation. For this one in particular, we're looking at kind of helping companies to expand their portfolios and grow their networks and connections through collaborations and partnerships. So are there some funders that you may not have come across before? Or alternatively, kind of what is the field looking like in terms of what other businesses are doing who are perhaps similar to you, and then could you follow similar trajectories? So what I will do at the end of this session is I will send out via email through Jen and through Dawn a source pack, which will give you a list of sources that we would typically use in a funding landscape scan. And alongside that, it'll have the URL, a brief description, geographical range, and also search and export functionality. The most important thing for me when doing a scan typically is that it has filters and good export functionality. If it doesn't have that, you will end up having to, rather than download data, transcribe data into like a spreadsheet, and nobody wants to waste time spending hours doing that. So in that kind of spreadsheet, it's filterable. I would always be filtering for those that I can export from and those that have good search functionality. Recently, I would say funding scans seem to have become a bit of kind of a fashion. We seem to be increasing in the amount of requests where people say, can you put a funding scan in there? As if it's a nice little bolt-on, which is great for me. It's keeping me in a job because I have to do lots of funding scans. However, there seems to be this assumption that they're very quick and they're very easy to do. Whereas the funding landscape is actually quite diverse, it's very varied, and so synthesizing that data can be complex and it can be time consuming. So if you're thinking of doing one yourself, I would say as a general rule of thumb, if anyone in the room has experience searching, for example, like a trial registry, like clinicaltrials.gov, very easy to search that. It's really easy to export. You can filter down things to get a nice, manageable chunk of results back. If I had to do a rapid trials review, I would say I could probably craft the search, as in identify terms, and run it in 1 to 2 days if I was really at a push. Funding, I could never do that in 1 to 2 days. It would probably take me the week to assemble all my sources together and then get the data out of them. So it does require a little bit more time, but I think the payoff it is still really valuable. So some of the difficulties, because there's such a wide range of sources, you very often will need to know where to look. Some are easier than others and the kind of more common sense than others. If you're really interested in, say, UKRI research, they quite handily have a gateway, which is searchable, and it contains all UKRI grants. So I think there are about 15 different programs and research councils listed that you can filter by. However, if you, for example, were looking at cancer research, then you would be well advised to look into the Association for Medical Research charity list. There are about 60 to 70 charities on that list who fund research and who are engaged in research. Cancer Research UK would be one of them, but there would be others that then potentially could be of interest that I would need to visit each individual site to get those results. Those sites don't always have the best functionality, and so again, that kind of increases the time there. Also, because of the differences in functionality, I very often have to keep changing how I'm searching. So whereas typically if you're searching in, say, a systematic review or again in trials registries, they more or less do the same thing. So once you've got your terms sorted out, you can copy that search across. It doesn't always translate so well for funding. So when you see that keyword search bar and it has a little link that says advanced or help or how to search, I would always be clicking on that just to make sure that I'm actually searching for what I think I am. Also, the way that funding is reported, so a lot of these sources are self-report, so either award recipients or funders themselves, or it could even be a third party, are uploading data. That means sometimes the data is missing or that the data fields don't quite correlate. So when you download things into a CSV file or an Excel file for analysis, you might, and it could be something really simple, abstract might be called summary. And some might have 20 different fields worth of data, some may only have 5. So you have to have separate tabs and then start to clean and merge those together. And again, that can be time consuming. Also, because of this idea of kind of collaborative funding efforts now, so we're seeing more and more frequently that it's actually not, say, for example, the Medical Research Council who offers a grant. It will be the Medical Research Council, perhaps in partnership with a university who may also put some funds towards it. Could also be in partnership with a medical research charity or a patient organisation, trying to capture the richness of all those different bodies who are interacting in that space can be quite difficult when you're trying to use something linear like a spreadsheet. As I've mentioned, that then makes kind of pushing all of those things together is quite difficult. So as I said, missing information, inconsistent data fields, and this idea of funding being kind of homogenous isn't always right. Typically, when I'm talking to other people, information specialists normally, or other people who are engaged in horizon scanning, particularly those that want a rapid scan, they will often say, well, it depends on kind of the technology readiness levels of the device we're looking at. So if we really want to kind of be thinking about the horizon and what's going to be coming, say, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're focusing more to the end of that diagram. We're really interested in kind of phase 3, phase 4, sometimes phase 2 trials. And so they will look at kind of those sources, and the earlier phases or kind of technology readiness levels, they tend to kind of put to the back of the pile because they'll say, well, it's too many things can happen in that time frame. These things may never actually come to fruition. And they typically place funding in that final category where they will say, you only tend to fund research ideas, principles, concepts, and so therefore, you know, it's a nice add-on to do, but this is things that really may not happen. However, I would say again, that's because people are thinking of funding as who funds research or who does research. Oh, it's academic. So it's someone in an office somewhere who's hypothesizing about a new drug or a new technology. When actually that's not the case, and we can get funding sources that span across the kind of whole range, which to anyone who's kind of involved in actually funding products, that would make sense, because if you think about bodies like Innovate, again, they tend to fund almost across that whole development pathway, apart from the earlier stages. So to say that funding only starts at that very early stage or is only of interest misrepresents the field. So this diagram is often used where it is directly mapped onto technology readiness levels, where then it signposts to different funders across that pathway. So you can see kind of, you have at the bottom your Association of Medical Research Charities spanning quite a large portion there. You have the medical research councils who are in the basic and applied research areas mainly. And then you have kind of a very generalized label for kind of companies and other investors that again can span that whole process. The issue with this is that sometimes when we're engaging and working with partners or stakeholders who are interested in this process, they're not specifically interested in technology readiness levels. They might be interested in, for example, policy. So how is policy and kind of how is governmental policies or the impact on research councils, how is that changing the focus of those organisations? And that can be something that, again, is quite useful to a business to understand where kind of policy is moving towards. But also at the end of that spectrum, so what is actually happening now? Are there companies or businesses like me who are in a similar space or in a slightly more advanced position? What did they do to get where I am? Who did they go to for funding? So whilst this diagram is useful, it is still very much focused on kind of the academic or clinical evaluation, research and testing phase of things. So instead, when I conduct a horizon scan for funding landscape, what I'm really looking at is these kind of 5 different categories. So grants are what I would refer to as your actual funding calls. That is the kind of instrument that delivers the money to you. If we look at open or closed grants, we can actually look at trends in kind of policy focus from that direction. Then you have your research, development and evaluation categories. That covers the basic applied research all the way through to clinical evaluation. And then that phase on the end, which is cases. So finding similar companies and then looking specifically at their funding and growth development journey and then targeting a similar pathway. So as an example, I'll run through, say, a very broad scan, but if I was interested in sepsis, then I would need to kind of obviously identify search terms. You can go, and as I'm sure many of you are aware, you can go to weeks-long, perhaps, kind of courses on how to write a systematic search strategy, how to search different databases. Because the funding databases and sources aren't that good, it actually works in your favour a little bit, because the more complex the search you put in, the more difficult and sometimes just absent your results are, because they can't kind of compute that level of complexity. So actually, it's easier to search. It is a double-edged sword, however, because then you tend to get a larger turn of results. But generally, if I'm doing a funding landscape search, I don't have to go to the same effort level. So I will either Magpie, which is where I will go to Google Scholar, unashamedly, any academics in the room, cover your ears, and I will type in sepsis systematic review, and I will search them by most recent, and I will look into the appendices or supplementary materials, and I will lift their strategy to make sure that the terms I'm using are consistent and are captured across the board. Alternatively, and this is a new one that I have been playing with, is just using something like ChatGPT or Gemini, and again saying, can you give me synonyms or related terms for? Particularly with Gemini, because Google are already very good at identifying synonyms for existing terms, that can be quite helpful in expanding a search. I'm going to quickly run through what some of the sources look like. So for example, if I wanted to conduct a grant search, I would either go to funders themselves, use 360 Giving, funds for NGOs, or looking specifically at things like Research or Grant Connect. These are all covered within the source pack that I'll give you. It's just to give you an indication of some of the difficulties within the field. So you can see with individual funders, they very often will just list, these are the current grants that are available. So if you wanted to actually analyse those or get a sense for trends, you would have to be putting that in by hand. So I tend to steer away from them if I'm trying to look across the board, unless there is something that is specifically of interest to me. 360 Giving is something that I'm very excited about. It is constantly being developed and updated. It very usefully kind of maps open and closed opportunities, and the data is input by the organisations themselves according to whenever they want. So it's very useful as that. However, the data does tend to be on a more of a meta level. So for example, they will say £200,000 was given by Wellcome to this research council to support some funding. And that's the level of detail you get. So it's not quite always as useful as it could be, but it does spit out some nice analytics. So it will tell you how many grants have fallen within your search, how they're changing over time. So it saves you on the analysis. Funds for NGOs, even though it sounds like it's targeting NGOs, will also report on private funding, so that can be quite useful. However, very clunky to use at the moment. So some of the searches aren't very helpful, don't return a lot of results. They gather them under themes, however, so you could just click healthcare and you'd get some returned results. Research Connect is what we use in-house in the university. Very useful again for past and present grants. You can access it through a central library service, so like Newcastle Library will have a version which is called Grant Connect, which does more or less the same thing. In terms of your research kind of development and evaluation, typically you'd be looking for your research gateways, so for large funders like Gateway to Research, development funds, or news and even updates. A particular, I'd say, limitation of kind of doing these type of scans is that for private funding in particular, unless you are using subscription service databases, you're not going to get the kind of private investment data. So it's something to be aware of, is that if you want that kind of level of data, you very often have to pay for a service. So UKRI's Gateway to Research is lovely, has lots of filters on. I would highly recommend it because it does cover the breadth of kind of government programs. Similarly, in the US, that's their alternative, and again, this will be included on the grants pack for you, but those grants are then limited to the US. So in terms of case searching, because this is something that we don't do a lot within the office because we don't work directly one-on-one, but I think is more useful to kind of some of the attendees here. We would either, as I said, kind of access the private kind of databases, so things like Bewhurst or Bowhurst, Mintle, but then you are having to pay for services. Or alternatively, you can use the trial registries. So it's not a brilliant approach, but if you were really pushed and you didn't want to pay for a service, what you can do is find a similar company to yourself, which can sometimes be difficult if you're quite at an early stage. There are different websites that can do this, and so this is one example here, where you would type in the name of a sepsis company, and this would be your output. Then I would search, say, trials.gov for that specific company name, and it will tell me how much of that company's research has been funded. It does have an option to say who, however, it is not always the best. So again, sometimes it will just say industry, and obviously that's not helpful. The better, kind of nicer people who work for those companies that submit these records may give funding information, and so again, that can be quite useful. Then in terms of analysis, this would be kind of a clean data set, so again, you have to obviously make sure that all of these columns are now doing what you think they're doing, they've all been labelled in the right way. But then we can look across for trends, so that can be over time, it can be looking at internationally, who is providing the most money for this? So for example, should we be shifting our searches to the US? And then also within the UK, who are the kind of research councils or charities that are putting the most money into these devices. We are trying to automate this process because, as I said, you're having to do a lot of site hopping. It makes it very time consuming. Output and export aren't consistent. So to speed up that process for us, we first of all tried to see whether there was an existing kind of database or registry that would encapsulate all of these things. So could we just go to kind of the Google of funding and say, give me everything? It doesn't exist. So we had this idea, or I had this idea, which of course it was never really going to work because it was too perfect, was that we would be able to track back individual funding instruments, so the individual grants, to the funding body, to the overall funder, and then say, for example, if that was UKRI, that would be captured in Gateway to Research, and so then we could start kind of channeling all of those repositories together to make one larger repository. As I said, that repository doesn't exist, so we've decided that we might start looking into this and developing this in-house. So you can kind of see the typical pathway here, for example, where you would have your individual grants, your councils, your overall funder, your gateway, and then this would feed into kind of a mega gateway in that sense. We are still very much at a development phase for that. So what I would like to do again at the end of this session is to share with you a link where you can give us some suggestions around not necessarily sources we should be looking at, but the kind of data that you might be interested in, the format and output of that data. What is it really that a funding landscape scan should do? I feel like at the moment, they're very much, again, an academic pursuit. We think it's very interesting to see if on a graph there's been a little bump one year in funding changes, but how does that actually translate? Is it usable? You know, how do we make these things work kind of with our stakeholders? So it is proving difficult to develop because, as I said, there is no overlap between the sources, and we also struggle with extraction. So if it's a registry, we can lift that quite easily and put it all together. If it's on a website, we're having to think the worst kind of solution, which would be literally me sat in an office typing it out and putting it all together. But also, even when I have that information, if you think back to that diagram that I showed at the outset, which was the technology readiness level pathway, and how those different funders map in, lots of them cross multiple stages. So is it really useful if you do a search and it spits out loads of information, but you're really interested in people who only fund proof of concept, but instead you've got funders in there like the MRC, which is going to give you 5,000 results, probably which most of them then aren't relevant. So we need to work out, again, some way of taking those abstracts and using kind of an AI crawler to then see if we could categorize them into technology readiness levels or different development pathways. But again, as you know, technology readiness levels aren't set things. There's no nice map onto this is number one and this is number two. So again, there's a lot of kind of subjective interpretation at the moment that we're engaging with, that it would be really useful to kind of get some feedback or some ideas on how that would work. So this is the link for the suggestions for the tool. There is also a page for sources that you might use for conducting funding scans if you do them already. As I said, it would be really appreciated if you could give us some feedback, and then in return, I will also send you guys my source list, because I appreciate this is like whirlwind, kind of almost lecture. This is how you do a scan, but once you've got the links for those sources, you can play around for themselves and work out what works best for you. That's me, thank you. Am I taking questions or?
Has anyone got any questions for Emma on the research or any of the sources of data or our engagement? Anything that you would find useful? Has anyone got anything? Wow, good job.
Well, I have to say, I apologise again. You go to kind of a 2-day course normally on this, so 40 minutes was, yeah, it's a lot to take in. But as I said, with those additional materials, they should help you to kind of start feeling your way around. Slides will also be shared. So again, you can kind of follow some of those examples and then devise your own strategies for doing funding landscape scans.
Thanks, Emma. That's brilliant.
Controls there for you.
Thank you. So Andrew, one of our partners, is going to join online because he's not very well. Hi, Andrew. going to hand over to Andrew.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Can everyone hear me? Uh, Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Hodgson. Sorry that I can't be there today, but I think I'm coming down with the COVID potentially. I work for the Innovation Super Network, which is now part of UMI. We are set up to support innovation within the Northeast. We do this with internal expertise in a range of disciplines, from B Corp to net zero strategy to IP, marketing, product design, and commercialization. Our aim is to develop the innovation and investment ecosystems to ensure companies feel supported and can achieve their potential. We also run industry-led challenges where we pose real-world problems to SMEs to solve, and we've just launched our latest one in Sunderland. If you wish to know more about that, please get in touch and I can point you in the direction of Sarah Cox, who's running it. And we also run access to finance programs. Our Pathways to Funding program, which is the one I'm talking about today, is funded through the Northeast Combined Authority. It's aimed at helping innovative companies at any stage find the correct type of funding. So this could be like regional, national grants, debt finance, or equity investment. We support companies on an investment readiness journey where we have developed our own investment readiness levels based on technology readiness levels. These have really helped us build some clear structure around something that in my eyes has always been a little bit unclear and a little bit smoke and mirrors, with far too much emphasis put on shiny pitch deck. We try and strip all that away to really focus on everything that goes into behind the pitch deck. Within the levels, we cover the early stages of defining your business model and financial forecasting, right through to ensuring you have comprehensive data room in place and support you with engaging with investors. And on the investors, we have quite a substantial network of investors from all around the UK and Europe. Over the past couple of years, we've really realized that we can't rely on just Northeast angels or angels in general, and therefore have developed close relationships with specialist venture capitalist firms. These firms have expert knowledge of various sectors such as health and life sciences or medical devices, all the way through to a recent successful raise, which was all around virtual reality specialists. We really try and connect businesses to the correct investors rather than just sort of scattergun approach. And I really think that this helps us try and, first of all, it helps us support the businesses that we work with really well, but it also helps us build that relationship up with the investors that we work with. Through this network, we are also an Innovate UK investor partner. So this means that we support Innovate UK on their investor partnerships program, which I believe is due to begin in October. This is where if you're looking for investment and you've got heavy R&D work to do, if you're successful, Innovate UK will fund 70% of your R&D costs. This is really in place to try and de-risk early stage investment, as we know that investors don't really like investing into risky R&D, and therefore if Innovate UK can fund that aspect, it means that the investment is going from there into the commercial activities. And again, if you would like to know any more about that grant, please get in touch. And I think this was a little bit of a whirlwind tour because I'm not quite feeling great, and I realized just now that I haven't showed you any of my slides. But if you'd like to know more or have any questions, I'm sure Dawn will share my details and we can connect and we can see if there's any investment activities that we can support you with. And that's me done. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Andrew. That was brilliant. I'll share Andrew's details. So if anyone's got a specific question or wants to book an appointment in probably 2 to 3 weeks' time, when you're better, that would be amazing. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's
Thanks
probably
for dialing
wise,
in,
yes.
and hope you feel better.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Right, I'm now going to hand over to John and Hannah from the BIPC, and they're going to talk through what the offer is at the BIPC and how they can support small businesses.
Thank you. Apologies, we just come on mics. There we go, I'm back.
Morning, everybody. Oh, I didn't realise these lights were quite as bright until I got it.
Sorry, are we?
Yes, sorry.
I think we're still on Andrew's slides.
Look what Andrew was going to talk about.
Oh, that was two before. There we go. Our slides aren't quite as impressive as Andrew's, it seems, but okay. So I'm Hannah Hoare. I work for the BIPC, the Business and Intellectual Property Centre,
And I'm John Musham. I work for the Economic Development team at the Newcastle City Council. I'll kick off and give you a little bit of an overview of BIPC, who we are, who we work with, what we do, and then I'll hand across to Hannah, who will cover some of the elements that she sort of specialises in, really. For those of you who haven't come across this before, as by way of background, the Business and IP Centre is a City Council project. We're in Newcastle, we're a collaboration between Economic Development and the Library Service. We are part of a network of BIPCs across the country. So there are 22 across the country. British Library coordinate the network. And we were the first BIPC outside of London about 12, 13 years ago. Although we're a Newcastle City Council project, we do operate across the region and support people looking to start up in business and existing businesses across the region. We work with economic development teams, business support agencies, and try to provide a front door for business support. And as I say, we work collaboratively with a number of other partners. In terms of the services that we provide, as the name would suggest, business and IP, a key part of our service is intellectual property, helping businesses to understand IP, what it is, how important it might be to their business, and how to apply it to their own innovation and ideas and business identity to protect what you're doing. We actually deliver most of that through IP surgeries, which we do throughout the week. All of our services are available on are bookable through our website, bipcnortheast.co.uk. So if you've got the IP page, tell you a bit about IP, there's a link, click on the link, and we'll book an IP surgery for you. And it all kind of works the same for all of the services. The IP surgeries, Matt from our team delivers most of those online. Himself and Stephen trained by the Intellectual Property Office, but we've also got IP barristers and solicitors that back up the service. So sometimes we'd direct a query straight to them if we needed an IP professional to handle it, or in a number of cases we'd see people through the surgery and then refer into one of the IP barristers or solicitors if we felt that was necessary. If you're interested in booking an IP surgery, let us know in a little bit detail what it is you want to get out of it, because Matt will do quite a bit of prep for you beforehand so you can get as much out of the session, and then he will do follow work with you afterwards. We wouldn't, for instance, be able to do a trademark or a patent search for you. We just haven't got the capacity. We used to do them. But Matt will help you to do it yourself, will help you to identify the categories you need to be looking at. He'll generally sort of flag up anything he can find that looks similar, you might have to have a look at. We just generally try to help you to do as much as you can yourself before you have to engage with the IP barristers, who obviously are quite expensive. So we like to save you money. The market intelligence element there, I'll hand on to Hannah in a moment to talk about that. It's worth talking about our BIPC experts in residence. I know Dawn mentioned you've got your own experts in residence. So same sort of term. If you go onto our website, look at the expert in residence page, there's about 50 of them. There's a smattering of business support agencies in there to help you link up with those. But the vast majority are small businesses who provide a one-off session. So you can book an appointment with an expert to talk about their particular topic, and we cover a whole range of stuff. We've got legal experts on there. People will help you with funding, marketing, marketing, comms, green, sustainable, health and safety. Roger Tipple, I'm just thinking the audience we've got here, is our innovator in residence. Roger's been with us right from the start, and helps people to determine whether their idea has got commercial potential and where to take it from there. So Roger's a very popular expert that we've got. As I say, you can book an appointment with any of them. Again, go to the page. Each of them's got their own individual web page. Tells you a bit more who they are, what they do, support they can provide, and you just click on the book an appointment, and we'll link you up with them and organise a one-to-one session. If you're a trading business and you're actually in Newcastle, Gateshead, Sunderland or Northumberland, and you speak to an expert and you'd like them to do a bit of work for you, for instance, if you're producing something, a particular product, and you need to present this to funders or you need to present it to your market, we've got professional photographers that take product photography and specialise in that. You could have a chat with one of them, and if you wanted them to actually provide a portfolio of photographs, they could actually do that through the City Life Business Support Grant that we've got. So as I say, any of the experts, you can have an appointment with them. If they want to do any work for you, the City Life Business Support Grant is paid to the business, and it enables you to fund 12 hours of their work. So we would, the expert would put the grant application in your behalf. We'd come back to you and ask a few extra questions about the business. Never looking to turn people down if we can help it. Once we've given you the nod, you work with the expert, and we give the grant to the business. Once the work's completed, the expert invoices you, and you've got the money to pay then. That's how it works. Very popular offer, and one, as I say, which I'm afraid is just limited to Newcastle, Gateshead, Sunderland and Northumberland. Our services are delivered from various locations across the region. Although we're based in the City Library, you can see a member of our staff and access our services from the locations that we've got on there. So we're in Berwick, Morpeth, Hexham, North Shields, South Shields, Sunderland and Gateshead. If you're actually located in Durham, you can access our services, no problem, but we don't actually have a physical base there. Do you want to pick up starting the market intelligence and pick up on some of the things that Emma mentioned as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the other things that the BIPC does is we facilitate access to a range of different databases, which are all hidden behind a paywall. As Emma mentioned, a lot of these databases are so expensive to access. We have paid subscription fees for these databases, so you can either come to Newcastle City Library or one of our other hubs to access them yourselves, or you can book an appointment with myself or my colleague Jason Goodings, and we can either meet you online via Teams or in person at a library, and we can help you pull the data that you require. As Emma mentioned, we have a subscription to a database called Grant Finder. I believe that an image was up on one of Emma's slides. You can basically run a search on Grant Finder for grants and loans as well, for basically anything that you might want to fund in terms of business or innovation. It's not as kind of tailored and in-depth as something that Emma would do, but basically you can filter it down by what it is you're wanting to fund, your particular industry, whether you want a grant or a loan, the location where you are, and then what we can do is we can download a list of potential grants along with eligible expenditure, who can apply and how much the grant is worth, so that you can basically go down the list and pinpoint the ones that would apply to your particular area. Other databases we have one called, we have a few different market intelligence websites, or databases, sorry. Mintel is incredibly popular. I think a lot of people know about Mintel. Basically a database with a lot of consumer market intelligence data. One of the most recent reports on Mintel, for example, dealt with the future of technology, talking about aspects like AI and neurotechnology, and specifically looking at how different demographics interact with these technologies, how they feel about it. It's very useful if you're wanting to get an idea about the kinds of people that might be accessing your services, using your inventions, your whatever your particular area is. We've got IBIS World as well. You can download a market research report of 60 to 70 pages as a PDF on the particular industry you're working in. For example, we had somebody working in virtual and augmented reality to help with mental health care. We're able to download a report on that industry, including projections into the future, how much money is coming into the industry, and everything broken down with explanations. He could then use that data in his own business plan to apply for grants. It's all available for that use. I will mention Compass as well, another very popular database. If you are looking for suppliers of a particular product that you might be using, if you're looking to research other businesses or other organisations within your particular field, or maybe you're looking for organisations that you can promote your service or your innovation to, Compass will basically generate a list of company contact details for you, which you can then download and have at home, so you can send out emails, make those calls, yeah, it's quite a popular one, Compass. Those are the main databases we have. We have a few others, Access to Research, Cobra as well, which is basically fact sheets, how to do anything relating to business. I'm going to be over at Newcastle City Library this afternoon from 1 p.m. if you do want to catch up and have a chat about the databases. Otherwise, we're going to send out our contact information, and you'll be able to book an appointment for that.
Yeah, we always do recommend initially having an appointment with Hannah or Jason, to go through where you might get the information that you need. And then after that, you can come and go and access the PCs and search to your heart's content from any of our locations.
I will say, if there is anything that you're looking for in terms of market intelligence that you're not able to get as secondary data from our databases, one of our experts in residence, Natasha McDonough, specialises in finding primary market research, market intelligence, but through surveys, focus groups, etc. So if you were interested in her services after you've accessed what we have to offer, again, her details are available on our website. And do we have time to talk about events?
Do we have time to talk about events?
Yeah.
Excellent. So the final thing the BIPC does to support businesses in the area is we run a variety of different events, networking events and workshops across the North East. I've just made a note of a few that I think you might be interested in. So on the 25th of September this month in the Sunderland Software Centre, we have a workshop called Get Your Business Grant Ready, where it's basically focusing on how to apply for grants. It's run by Kate Duffy, who specialises mainly in social enterprises, but a lot of what we'll talk about will be applicable to any type of grant application. Here in Newcastle, we've got a PR workshop on the 19th of September. Sorry, that's in Wallsend, actually, isn't it?
Yes.
No, yes, Wallsend. Which, again, is very useful in terms of the business side of things, in terms of, it's run by Keith Newman.
Yep.
It's going to be quite a popular one. On the 14th of November, we've got an AI workshop. So if AI is an area that you haven't explored yet, really recommend you attend that one. It's at the Word in South Tyneside. It's going to be a practical workshop where you can bring your laptop, bring your phone, and basically be talked through how to use AI if that isn't something that you've had access to before. On the 11th of October, we've got a photography workshop in Morpeth. So if what you are creating is a physical item that can be photographed, that would be an excellent one to go to in order to present it to advantage. And finally, we've got a market research event in Morpeth on the 4th of December, again talking about the different types of market intelligence, how to understand your consumer demographic. All these events are free as well, and you can sign up via our website.
I mean, the events, 99% of them are actually delivered by the experts. So you have a one-off session with the expert in residence, and you're not in an eligible area to apply for the City Life grant, or you might want to use the City Life grant with another expert, but you want to know a little bit more about that topic, then you can go along to one of the workshops. as Hannah said, they're all over the region, but if you can't make a particular one on a particular date, hopefully we'll be running it again somewhere else where it's more convenient for you. So I'd recommend going to our website, signing up for a newsletter, and that'll keep you updated with anything new that we've got coming off, events that we've got coming off, or any new bits of money that we've got that we think might be useful.
Absolutely. And I believe our details are going to be sent out after this, will they, in the email?
The slides and your details.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And we'll be around for a little bit afterwards if you do want to
Yeah.
chat. Or book
And I'll
an
stick some
appointment.
of our
Yeah.
flyers just on the coffee table out there later, if you want to pick one of those up.
Brilliant,
Thank you.
We're just going to go into our expert panel session now, and we're going to dial in Oliver, and I'm not sure if, I think Andrew's gone out, and Sean from British Business Bank as well. So we're going to have two experts on screen as well. Just gives you an opportunity to ask any questions, and then also we'll run through some of the questions that's in the chat as well.
While we're waiting for them to join us, can I just mention, it's not a BIPC event, but on Thursday at the County Hotel in Newcastle is the Regional Business Support Showcase event. So a lot of the business support providers across the region will be there, talk a little bit about what they do, and they'll all have sort of stands there.
That's useful.
So as I say, 10 o'clock this Thursday. As I say, it's not a BIPC event, so it's not on our website, but if you look on Eventbrite, it'll be there for you.
So Sean and Oliver are on screen now. Could you both just introduce yourselves, just kind of your organisation and a bit of background and how you help small businesses? Sean, do you want to start?
Network manager for the British Business Bank in the northeast of England, northeastern Tees Valley. And for those who people don't know, the bank is UK government owned, funded by the Treasury, and the Business Secretary is our nominal shareholder. And we support small businesses on their funding journey across the UK with a number of debt and equity programmes and have around 12 billion out in the market and around 86 billion in guarantees, including the COVID loan programmes and the successor growth fund programmes that operate across the UK. But as I say, we operate across both debt and equity. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Sean. Oliver, can you...
Morning everyone. I'm Oliver Mochizuki. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fundsurfer. We're a funding and investment platform based in Bristol and London. We essentially help investors with deal origination, sourcing and pre-vetting investment opportunities. And I'm also a family office advisor for a number of family offices making investments in tech, healthcare, media, entertainment and sport. Essentially, we source investment opportunities for our investors. We also make direct investments. At LIGO Partners, where I'm a strategic advisor, we've invested 450 million since 2022 across 44 different companies, including some medtech and biotech firms. So basically, all I do all day, every day is talk to investors and talk to exceptional companies raising capital.
Sounds very exciting. And you're
mostly sat behind a computer, unfortunately. Not that exciting.
And you're international as well, aren't you, Oliver? So
yes.
you work globally.
Yeah, we work globally, so we're working across US, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, UK and Europe.
Brilliant, thanks Oliver. Brilliant. Has anyone got any questions for any of the panels? So you obviously met the keynote speakers from this morning, and Sean and Oliver have just introduced themselves. Has anyone in the audience got any questions that they'd like to ask? Are there any questions on the chat? Yeah. No, okay. Anyone that's dialed in and is online, if you've got any questions for any of the panel, If you can just put it in the chat, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So sorry. Hi, yes.
Hi, Ian Taylor from the Health Innovation Team. So this is a question for Oliver. What size of fund do you, probably to Sean as well, what size of funds do you look at investing? So what's your cut-off minimum?
Yeah, so just to jump on that one, it really depends on what type of funding we're talking about. Fundsurfer offers access via our platform to crowdfunding as well as community share offers. Crowdfunding can be anything, you know, from £1,000 to £100,000 plus. If we're looking at equity investment, typically we're looking at a minimum of 1 million, but with a sweet spot of say 3 to 5 million. We typically don't work on seed rounds of capital. It's looking at Series A and above, and then within my family office network, typically we're investing sort of minimum of 1 million. But you know, every deal we look at case by case, deal by deal. So a lot of the time it will depend on is there traction, is the momentum, you know, is there a really strong team with a good background in the sector that we're looking at. So it can depend, but for equity investment, typically 1 to 5 million plus would be a sweet spot for us.
Thank you.
So obviously the bank works across both debt and equity. So if you look at debt for the first instance, we run the Startup Loans programme, which is anything from sort of £500 up to 25k, up to 4 loans per business. So we could have 4 directors in the business who each can get a loan because it's a personal business purposes. We run a number of other debt programmes, including our regional funds programmes that operate across the UK, including the Northern Powers Investment Fund in the North West and the North East and Yorkshire. And that operates from sort of 25k debt-wise up to 100. And then there's a large debt fund of 100k to 2 million and equity of up to 5 million. We run regional angel programme as well. And that obviously works with a number of early stage businesses looking at sort of pre-seed, in some instances pre-seed. And the critical thing to bear in mind is the bank is not making the lending or the investment decision. We appoint a delivery partner that has their own credit or investment process. So they make that decision. We do not interfere in that process. If you like, we're looking at the macro of making sure that investments and debt funding is spread evenly throughout the UK, trying to rebalance, particularly in the equity market, where you look in the angel space, the Golden Triangle, London, Oxford, Cambridge operates, and you see a lot of funding go into companies in that area. But what about businesses beyond the Golden Triangle that are in Scotland or the North East or Wales or wherever it might be? So our regional angel programme operates under the premise that those angel groups that are in that programme, that are probably typically investing anything up to sort of £500,000, are prepared to invest regionally, as an example. I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions? Hi, yes, please.
Thanks. Cole Sims, Biology Team Lead at Lightox. I guess it's kind of a follow-up to what Sean said about what do you see funding in the region specifically. Sean mentioned the Golden Triangle and those of us in this room that operate out of Newcastle and the North. I think it's sometimes a little bit disheartening when we look at the outputs, Emma, as I'm sure you're aware of where Innovate UK funding goes, or etc. And you see London, Cambridge, Oxford repeated ad nauseum, and kind of what in the next 3 to 5 years you see happening with funding in the region in terms of policy of other government wanting to spend money outside of those areas and privately.
Is there anything?
I think that might be one for me, since we're a government-owned institution. Well, obviously we have our Powerhouse Fund, which I mentioned. The 2 loan elements to it, a small loan and larger loan, which is run by NEL fund managers on our behalf. That's a 5-year programme, so it's government-backed cash. And then Maven operate the equity programme in the North East. We have other fund managers working in Yorkshire and another set working in the North West, split into sort of 3 parts. We're running similar programmes in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland and in South West England as well. and the Midlands Engine Fund in East and West Midlands. So that's the sort of regionality to it. The Regional Angel Programme, again, you know, the whole premise of it is that we'll create a joint fund with an angel group, the likes of Patura, Power Equity, and there's around 13 angel groups on that programme, on the understanding that they're not investing in the Golden Triangle, and that they are investing regionally. We also work with a host of other angel groups. We have a pilot project at the moment supporting female founders, for example, that works with the likes of Lifted Ventures and the Lifted Project, which you may have heard of, Mint up in Scotland, and 2 other funders in Wales and Northern Ireland, where we're trying to encourage female founders to come forward to seek investment, and female investors to join these groups to invest in female-led businesses. And Lifted, for example, although we don't put funds directly into a fund that they operate, we sponsor a number of their activities and programs around investment readiness and pitch events and so on and so forth. So the government is very keen to see an even distribution of funds, but it is a challenge, and we accept that, because if you look at the Golden Triangle, it's operated since probably the end of the Second World War. So you're trying to break down 60, 70 years of that market and that environment, but we are doing all we can to encourage regionality to funding, definitely.
Brilliant, thanks, Sean. I think as well some of the next Talking Point Tuesdays will be helpful as well. So we've got the RSS, the Regional Research Support Service, which specifically looks at NIHR funding. So we've got a workshop coming up on that, which will be helpful. And then we've also got a workshop, Talking Point Tuesday, coming up on Innovate funding. So how you apply for Innovate funding, the best ways, and kind of tips and hacks. So we've got those coming up as well, which I think will be useful.
I've got a question. Is this one working?
Yeah.
It was just, hello Sean and hi Oliver. It was just a more general question really, just to sort of ask any tips or advice you would give to like a health sector SME that, you know, just didn't know where to start in terms of funding, where to look, which events to go to, just a general sort of tips and guidance you could give on that.
I can pick up on that one. So when you're looking at funding, what's really important is to understand really the full range of funding options that are available to you. And if we're looking specifically at healthcare funding, you know, you can look at NHS funding, you know, where there's an opportunity to develop something that's going to support, you know, community-based health and social priorities. You can look at local authorities. Obviously, charitable grants and government grants. There's a range of different programs that you can access. FundServe is an access point for SIB grants and loans, social investment business. We help with access to grants and loans from £15,000 to get investment ready, all the way up to £1.5 million. Then you can look at innovation funds, UK RI, so UK Research and Innovation. Private investment, of course, is an important pool of capital, and with that, the best thing you can do is really just pick up the phone. You know, Google is your friend. Research who's investing in healthcare and which sectors and which space, who's actually current, writing checks, and you know, initiate those conversations with them. Obviously, you have to understand a little bit more about, you know, how much you're looking to raise. That would determine which route to go down, but in terms of the range of funding, there is a lot of funding available, but you have to be able to understand the nuances of the different funding pots that are around. That would be my 2 pennies.
Thanks, Oliver. Sean, have you got anything to add to that?
If you wanted to understand the funding options, we run our own finance hub, which has case studies and examples of businesses that have successfully raised funds, both debt and equity. You can also look at the different types of funding, so it will explain equity, what is angel investment, what is venture capital, what's the difference between the two. It'll also talk through the different types of debt funding, asset finance, and so on and so forth. And it will give you links to things like the UK Business Angels Association to try and help you on signposts on funding. You can always have a chat with me. I'll try and signpost as much as I can. The bank doesn't have an FCA license at this point because we don't need one, because all the programs go by a delivery partner, so we're using their licenses, if you like, because they're making the lending investment decision. But by the same token, I would always encourage you to look at accelerator programs. So if there's any accelerator programs operating in a particular area that you're running in, whether that be public or private, look at those. Try and work with like-minded individuals, engage as much as you can, join events like this, and be a bit like a sponge, soak up the knowledge, gain it, and try and really sort of be active and out in the market. Work with groups like this. There's other groups like, you know, sorry to say, Bio Now and Medilink that are active, and you can obviously engage and join those groups, and they all run a number of events and activities like this throughout the year.
Brilliant, thank you. A question for you both. So in terms of a pitch deck, so for to go to an investor, how much detail would you expect to see that? How much research and evidence would you expect a small business to do to put into a really, really good pitch deck?
That's a tough question because it depends on so many different factors, but there's genuinely a pretty routine path to follow, I think, when it comes to investor pitch decks. I think when you see a deck that has, 60 pages, that's a bit of a concern. That's something to come a little bit later. You want to have, I would say, 10 to 12 slides outlining key information, but you can really find a ton of resources for this online. Sequoia, which is a big investment firm, have a very good pitch deck template, which you can find online, and I would follow that. But I would say 10 to 12 slides is the maximum we would like to see in an initial pitch deck. It's fine to have a much wider deck with a ton of research and a lot more information for a follow-on, but really what you're looking to do is catch the investors into interest and attention to enable you to have an initial call with them. And then following that call, you want to have a full data room that they can access. So within that data room, you can have a whole ton of information, as much information as you can possibly provide. I wouldn't worry too much about trying to create a 50-page deck. I'll be completely honest, most investors don't read the decks front to back. They're going to jump to the investor ask. That's going to be the first thing they're going to look at. How much money are you looking for? What does the team look like? What is their background? Do they have traction? What are they trying to achieve? What is the big problem that you're trying to fix? This is all key information. But I would say research is your friend. You can find great examples of pitch decks that have successfully raised, a lot of money, and you can find those online. So I would say research is the most efficient route there, to make sure you're not putting something in front of an investor that is structured incorrectly or has too much information.
Brilliant, thanks, Oliver. Sean, is there anything that you...
I think Oliver's covered succinctly. I think, it's still, it is the basics. I remember reading a pitch deck a while ago now, but I still didn't understand after a few pages what the business actually did. It hadn't been clearly articulated. That was quite difficult. Understanding who the key principles are. I mean, I come from a debt background. I worked for 3 major banks in the UK, and the team is equally as important as the product or the service that you're offering. So understanding the dynamics of the team, If you haven't got a team built at that point, what you're going to do to address that? Because sometimes you may have sole founders or just, you know, two founders or something like that. How are you going to address that? And the ask is really important. Again, people don't always articulate how much they actually want and what they're going to do with the money. That's the other thing. It's really basic stuff sometimes. And when you do come to pitch, eventually make sure that you practice, even if it's in front of, you know, friends or family or in the mirror. I've seen some awful pitches that go wrong and people don't know their stuff, or it's online and they can't get the laptop to work, and all you remember is how bad the pitch was, not anything. I remember one where she didn't get the laptop to work, poor lady, and it was just terrific. And she was unfortunate. The previous person who pitched had worked for an investment bank, and the pitch was absolutely perfect. And so she was coming off the back of this wonderful pitch, and she just made a complete hash of hers. And you've got that 3 minutes, 5 minutes, however long they give you to get to hook there, as Oliver said, to hook the interest. And if you can't do it in that time, somebody else will, because you might be one of half a dozen or whatever pitching that day. So always remember that, and first impressions count. They really do. You know, be on time, and I know it sounds really silly, but the number of times people don't turn up on time, or they don't know their stuff, or they can't get their laptop to work. It can be embarrassing at times for them. I feel for them, but investors are busy people,
Yeah.
and just as lenders are. And I used to say when I was a lending manager, I want everything to present it to me in a nice little red bow on the top, and I haven't got the time to chase after you. And it may sound really harsh. I'm not your mum. It's not my job to do the job for you. Your job is to get all the information that's required at that point in time to the individual you're trying to get the money from, or the individuals. That's your job. It's not my job. It's not my job to chase you. I'm not there to wipe your nose. It's your job to get that. And that might sound very harsh, but that's the reality of the world we live in. You know, so Oliver's nodding his head as well. I think he agrees.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Sean, I think that's really, really good advice, especially around practice. And just to add to that, you know, I don't want to be, again, too harsh, but the reality is that less than 1% of companies receive VC capital. So as an example, LIGO Partners, we review 60 to 80 deals a month. Maybe we're reviewing in proper detail 5, of which 1 or 2 might go forward to the investment committee. So you're really up against it in terms of numbers. So being succinct in your pitch and being practiced is so important. We have a monthly webinar where we have 7 companies pitch. They get 5 minutes each. And the level of polish on display there is just out of this world, because they've got 5 minutes. And it sounds like it's not a lot of time, but it's plenty enough to get through the key points. But if at the end of the pitch, we don't understand what the business is doing, that's a bad situation. So practice is absolutely key. And also understanding that the average number of pitches before you'll see a term sheet is around 45. We have a lot of clients come to us and they're feeling very despondent. They've had 10 rejections. They think it's all over. We say you're nowhere even close. You know, you're going to have to keep driving forward. So you have to keep your head up, and you have to have thick skin, and you have to be able to be very resilient and also persistent. Those are the 2 things that I think win out ultimately, because you have to be prepared to take a lot of no's. And it could be any number of reasons that you might not even find any, get any feedback on why the investor has passed. So you just can't take it personally, and just, you know, dust yourself off and onto the next pitch.
Brilliant, thank you. Good advice, Oliver. Thank you. Thank you, Sean, as well. That was really helpful. Coming at it from your previous banking experience as well. That's really some good nuggets there. Thank you.
Dawn, I've also got Andrew Hodgson from Innovation Super Network has also added on the chat with that. He would add to have some health economic data within the deck as well. How does the solution reduce time or money what is the return on investment for both the investor but also for your customers?
Yeah, I think that's really
Thanks,
good points as
Andrew.
well. Thanks, Andrew. And we'll be running a Talking Point Tuesday on health economics. So a whirlwind tour of health economics and how you can pull together your information for applications and investor pitches as well. So that'll be coming, I think it's March, but we'll send details of dates and specific themes. Has anyone got any more questions? No?
I have one for Emma. It's so as you said, you're sort of moving away from the manual scans and trying to build this big automated repository that you can search. It's a tough question, but like, how much is that a priority right now, and is there any sort of roadmap for when that's available to the wider community?
It's one of my priorities because at the moment I'm the person chained to the desk doing the scans. We have scoped, again, so all of the initial source lists that will be distributed amongst the audience has been scoped. So we have an idea of crossover and duplication. I was anticipating that there would be a large amount of duplication between the larger funding registries and the smaller medical research charities. It's quite unfortunate, but perhaps speaks to the complexity of the task. There actually isn't a lot of overlap at the moment. So each source will have to be extracted, and we have ranked those according to how easy they are to extract. So the general rule of thumb is if it's a working database that is operating off an API, or you can download a CVS file or Excel file from it, relatively easier data to house. If it's those plain text websites, which unfortunately is the majority of open grant calls, medical research charities, they are going to create a significant problem because you could write some sort of crawling program to lift that data, but it is extremely complex because it means it has to be able to interpret, say, that written paragraph and then place it into those fields that we'd be getting from the databases. We also have to then consider whether information is publicly or privately available. And then, as I said, we could probably, I think, do it in a relatively short time frame, but it's around actually making that data useful. So as I said, I keep returning to this, and my background is in the social sciences, so maybe that's why. But it's not about just saying, oh, that's an interesting trend, that was cool, innovate, you know, it gave this much money last year, but they didn't this year. Why? Yes, that can be helpful, but how is that actually telling us or giving insight for the stakeholders and the kind of consumers who need it? So around those kind of technology readiness levels, how do we translate that kind of information into this is for companies who are working at this level, etc. So we are hoping it is coming soon. As I said, the groundwork has been laid. We know what sources we would like to extract from. We are still kind of asking questions around data fields. So again, how could we best represent that information? What is the best form of output? And as I said, how do we actually contextualize this data in a meaningful way? But yeah, if you have any more questions, you can come and ask at the end.
Brilliant, thank you. Perfect. So if we haven't got any more questions, we're going to draw to a close. All the slides and contact details will be sent out afterwards, and the details of the next Talking Point Tuesdays will be sent out as well, circulated. Brilliant. Thank you all for coming. There's still 30 minutes outside for further networking and to catch up with anyone from the panel that you'd like to speak to as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sean and Oliver, for joining us.
Thanks for
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Good day.